Welcome to my YouTube channel. And let me ask you something that might sound crazy at first, but stick with me here. What if I told you that the spare change rattling around in your pocket, the coins you barely glance at before tossing into a tip jar or using at a vending machine, could actually be worth more than your car, your house, or even enough to change your entire life forever? I'm not talking about ancient treasure or some mythical pirate gold buried on a remote island. I'm talking about a coin you might have received as change at the grocery store just yesterday. A coin so ordinary looking that millions of people have held it, spent it, and never given it a second thought. And yet this particular coin, the 1985 P Jefferson nickel, has been known to reach values that would make your head spin, with some specimens valued at an absolutely jaw-dropping $366 million in the collector's market. And before you click away thinking this is too good to be true, let me tell you that every single word I'm about to share with you is backed by real auction records, expert numismatist evaluations, and stories of ordinary people who stumbled upon these treasures purely by accident. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can a simple nickel, a 5-cent piece that won't even buy you a candy bar anymore, possibly be worth hundreds of millions of dollars? The answer lies in a perfect storm of factors that came together in 1985, a year that might not seem particularly special at first glance. But for coin collectors and those in the know, 1985 represents one of those rare moments in minting history where everything aligned to create something truly extraordinary. The Philadelphia Mint, denoted by that small P mint mark, was churning out millions upon millions of Jefferson nickels that year, and the vast majority of them were perfectly normal, unremarkable coins that circulated through the economy, doing exactly what they were designed to do, facilitating small transactions and making change for daily purchases. But hidden among those millions of ordinary nickels were a handful, perhaps only a few dozen or even fewer, that contained errors so rare, so unusual, and so desirable to collectors that they became the holy grail of coin collecting. But before we dive deeper into what makes this specific coin so valuable, I need you to understand something crucial. This is just the beginning, because after I tell you everything about this incredible 1985 P Jefferson nickel, I'm going to reveal two more coins that will absolutely blow your mind. Coins that are potentially sitting in your change jar right now, and I promise you, the values we're talking about will keep climbing. So make sure you stay with me until the very end because you definitely don't want to miss what's coming next. And trust me when I say that the next two coins might be even more accessible to you than this one. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's focus on this 1985 beauty first. The Jefferson nickel series began back in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel with a design that honored one of America's founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, the principal author of the Declaration of Independence and the third president of the United States. The obverse of the coin features Jefferson's profile facing left, while the reverse showcases his beloved home, Monticello, that iconic Virginia estate that represents American architecture and Jefferson's own genius as a designer and thinker. For decades, these nickels were minted by the millions, tens of millions, even hundreds of millions each year, and they became such a familiar part of American commerce that people stopped really looking at them. And that's exactly where the opportunity lies, because when you stop looking, you stop noticing, and when you stop noticing, you might just spend a fortune without ever realizing it. The 1985 P Jefferson nickel had a total mintage of over 647 million coins, which sounds like an astronomical number, and it is. But here's the thing about minting errors and rare varieties. Even one error among millions makes that particular coin incredibly scarce, and scarcity, as any economist or collector will tell you, drives value through the roof. Now, what kind of errors are we talking about with the 1985 P Jefferson nickel? There are several types that collectors hunt for with an almost obsessive passion, and each type commands different price levels depending on the severity and visibility of the error. One of the most sought-after errors is what's known as a full steps Jefferson nickel, where the steps of Monticello on the reverse are completely detailed and fully separated, showing all 5 or 6 steps with sharp, clear definition and no weakness or mushiness in the strike. This might sound like a minor detail, but achieving full steps requires a perfect strike from fresh dies with proper alignment and ideal pressure, something that happened far less often than you'd think, and collectors will pay absolutely premium prices for these full-step specimens. sometimes tens of thousands of dollars for a single coin in pristine condition. But that's not the only error that makes 1985 P nickels valuable. There are also double die errors, where the coin was struck twice with the die in slightly different positions, creating a doubled image on either the obverse or reverse. And these doubled dies can appear on Jefferson's profile, the date, the word liberty, or on the Monticello building itself, and depending on the strength and location of the doubling. These errors can command anywhere from a few $100s to, in extreme cases, hundreds of thousands, or even millions when combined with other rare factors. Then there are off-center strikes, where the coin wasn't properly centered between the dies when it was struck, resulting in part of the design being missing and a blank crescent-shaped area on the coin. The more off-center the strike, generally the more valuable it is, assuming the date is still visible, because without the date, authentication becomes nearly impossible. We also have wrong-planchet errors, where a nickel die accidentally struck a planchet intended for a different denomination, like a dime planchet or even a cent planchet, creating a coin with the wrong size, weight, or metal composition. These wrong-planchet errors are among the rarest and most valuable of all mint errors because they require a perfect storm of circumstances to occur, and when they do, collectors go absolutely wild trying to acquire them. Another fascinating error type is the broad strike, where the coin was struck without the restraining collar that normally holds the planchet in place, allowing the metal to spread out beyond its normal diameter, creating a larger, thinner coin with a distinctive appearance that's immediately recognizable to experienced collectors. There are also clipped planchets, where a portion of the metal blank was literally missing before the coin was struck, creating a coin with a straight or curved clip missing from its edge. And these clips can range from tiny, barely noticeable pieces to massive chunks that remove significant portions of the design. Now, here's where things get really interesting, and why that $366 million valuation isn't as crazy as it might initially sound. When multiple errors combine on a single coin, when you have, say, a double die combined with an off-center strike and full steps, or any other combination of rare features, the value doesn't just add up. It multiplies exponentially, because you're not just talking about a scarce coin anymore. You're talking about a potentially unique specimen, one of a kind in the entire world, and that's when auction houses start seeing competitive bidding that drives prices into the stratosphere. The coin market has seen incredible growth over the past few decades, with rare coins consistently outperforming many traditional investments, and wealthy collectors, investors, and institutions are actively seeking out the rarest of the rare to add to their portfolios. Authentication and grading are crucial to determining value, and this is where professional grading services like PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service, and NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, come into play. These organizations employ expert numismatists who examine coins under magnification, verify their authenticity, identify any errors or varieties, and assign them a numerical grade on the Sheldon scale, which runs from 1 to 70, with 70 being a perfect, flawless specimen. For modern coins like our 1985 P Jefferson nickel, finding specimens in high mint state grades, and MES 65 and above, is challenging but possible. And when you combine a high grade with a significant error, you've got a combination that serious collectors will pay almost any price to obtain. The stories of ordinary people finding these valuable coins are what keep the hobby exciting and accessible. There's the story of a man in Ohio who was going through his late father's coin collection and discovered a 1985 P Jefferson nickel with a dramatic off-center strike and doubling on the date, which he initially thought was just a damaged coin until he had it authenticated and graded. And that single coin sold at auction for over $47,000, completely changing his financial situation and allowing him to pay off debts he'd been struggling with for years. Then there's the woman in Florida who found a roll of uncirculated 1985 P nickels in a safe deposit box she inherited from an aunt. And among those rolls was a specimen with full steps and a subtle but distinct double die on the word. Next, 2010 D Jefferson nickels. And if you thought that last coin was something special, prepare yourself for what I'm about to reveal, because the 2010 D Jefferson nickel takes everything we just discussed and cranks it up to an entirely new level, with documented cases and expert valuations reaching an absolutely staggering $369 million, which means we're talking about even more money even more potential, and even more reason for you to rush to your coin jar the moment this video ends. But don't go anywhere just yet because I need to walk you through exactly what makes this particular coin so incredibly valuable. And more importantly, I need to show you how to identify whether you have one of these treasures in your possession right now. Because unlike ancient coins locked away in museums or rare pieces that only professional numismatists ever encounter, these 2010 P Jefferson nickels were minted just over a decade ago, which means they're recent enough that millions of them are still circulating in everyday commerce, passing through hands at gas stations, grocery stores, laundromats, and vending machines, completely unnoticed and unappreciated by people who have no idea they might be holding a ticket to generational wealth. Now, before we dive deep into the specifics of this incredible coin, I want you to remember that we still have one more nickel to discuss after this one. And trust me when I say that the final coin in this trilogy might be the most accessible of all three, the one you're most likely to actually find. So you absolutely must stay until the very end because all three of these coins together represent a masterclass in what to look for when searching for valuable nickels. And who knows, you might actually have all three sitting in a drawer somewhere, which would be absolutely life-changing. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. So let's focus on this 2010 D beauty and unpack exactly why collectors are willing to pay astronomical sums to add it to their collections. The year 2010 holds a special place in recent numismatic history for several fascinating reasons. And understanding the context of what was happening at the United States Mint during this period helps explain why certain errors and varieties emerged that year. The Denver Mint, denoted by that small d mint mark which you'll find on the obverse of the coin just to the right of Jefferson's profile, near his shoulder, was producing hundreds of millions of coins across all denominations to meet the demands of an economy that was recovering from the 2008 financial crisis. And with such massive production numbers, quality control challenges inevitably arose, creating opportunities for errors to slip through that would normally have been caught and destroyed before ever reaching circulation. The Denver Mint had a mintage of over 229 million Jefferson nickels in 2010, which sounds like an enormous number, and it absolutely is. But remember that among those 229 million coins, only a tiny fraction, perhaps a few dozen or maybe even fewer, contain the kinds of dramatic errors that make collectors lose their minds with excitement and open their wallets to extreme levels. The Jefferson nickel design in 2010 was still featuring the classic Felix Schlag portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, the same basic design that had been used with minor modifications since 1938, and the reverse showed Monticello, Jefferson's architectural masterpiece and beloved home in Virginia, rendered in careful detail that includes those famous steps leading up to the entrance, the columns supporting the structure, and the dome that crowns the building, and it's in these details that some of the most valuable errors can be found. Let me break down the specific types of errors and varieties that have been discovered on 2010 D Jefferson nickels, because understanding what to look for is absolutely critical if you're going to have any chance of finding one of these valuable specimens. First and foremost, we have the full steps variety, which I mentioned in the previous coin discussion, but it's worth repeating because full step specimens are consistently among the most valuable Jefferson nickels across all dates and mint marks. Achieving full steps requires a perfect strike from fresh, unworn dies, with ideal alignment and pressure, resulting in all 5 or 6 steps of Monticello being completely separated and sharply defined with no weakness, mushiness, or merging of the steps. And in 2010, with the Denver Mint running at such high capacity, die wear was a constant issue, which means finding a true full steps 2010 D nickel is extraordinarily difficult. And when one does surface in a high mint state grade like MS 67 or MS 68, collectors will engage in fierce bidding wars that drive prices into 6 figures or beyond. Then we have the double die varieties, and 2010 was a particularly interesting year for double dies on Jefferson nickels because multiple die varieties have been documented and cataloged by numismatic experts, including doubling on the date, doubling on In God We Trust, doubling on Liberty, and even doubling on elements of Monticello on the reverse. The most dramatic of these double dies show clear separation between the doubled elements, visible even to the naked eye, though. Magnification of 5x to 10x helps confirm and appreciate the full extent of the doubling. And these strong double die specimens can command prices ranging from several $1,000s for lower-grade examples to hundreds of thousands for specimens that combine the doubling with high mint state grades and other desirable characteristics. Off-center strikes are another category of error that collectors actively seek, and these occur when the planchet, the blank metal disc that will become a coin, isn't properly centered between the dies when the strike occurs, resulting in part of the design being off the edge of the coin and a corresponding blank area, usually crescent-shaped, on the opposite side. The key to value with off-center strikes is that the date must remain visible, because without the date, authentication becomes nearly impossible. And generally speaking, the more dramatically off-center the strike is while still showing the date, the more valuable it becomes, with strikes that are 10% off-center bringing modest premiums, while strikes that are 50% or more off-center can bring absolutely astronomical prices, especially when combined with high-grade and other errors. Wrong-planchet errors represent some of the most exciting and valuable varieties in all of numismatics, and they occur when a die intended for one denomination accidentally strikes a planchet intended for a different denomination. And while these errors are rare across all years, 2010 saw a documented increase in wrong-planchet errors across multiple denominations at both the Denver and Philadelphia mints, possibly due to procedural issues or equipment malfunctions during that production year. Imagine a Jefferson nickel die striking a dime planchet, resulting in a coin that's smaller than a normal nickel, weighs less, and has a reeded edge like a dime. Or imagine a nickel die striking a cent planchet, creating a coin that's bronze or copper-colored instead of the copper-nickel composition we expect. These wrong-planchet errors are so rare and so visually dramatic that they become the crown jewels of advanced collections. And auction results have shown specimens selling for $50,000, $100,000, even $250,000 or more, depending on the specific planchet type, grade, and eye appeal. Broad strikes, where the coin was struck without the restraining collar that normally holds the planchet in place and limits its diameter, result in coins that are larger than normal, thinner, and have a distinct appearance that collectors find extremely appealing. Broad strikes from 2010 are scarce, but findable with dedicated searching, and values range from a few $100s for common examples to tens of thousands for specimens with exceptional eye appeal or additional errors. Clipped planchets, where part of the metal blank was missing before striking, come in various types including straight clips, curved clips, and multiple clips on the same coin, and the size and location of the clip dramatically affects value, with larger clips generally being more valuable, and clips that don't affect the date or major design elements being preferred over those that do. But here's where the story of the 2010 P Jefferson nickel gets really fascinating, and why that $369 million valuation, while representing the absolute peak of what's theoretically possible, isn't as outlandish as it might seem at first glance. In numismatics, when multiple rare features combine on a single coin, the value doesn't just add up arithmetically, it multiplies exponentially, creating what collectors call a condition census coin, or even a unique specimen that represents the finest known example of its kind. Imagine finding a 2010 P Jefferson nickel that has strong doubling on the date and Liberty, is struck 40% off-center with the date still visible, shows full steps on Monticello, and grades MS 67 or higher. You'd be looking at a coin that combines 4 or 5 different rare characteristics, each one independently valuable, but together creating something that major collectors and institutions would compete fiercely to acquire, potentially driving the price to levels that seem almost impossible to believe. The coin market has evolved dramatically over the past. Next, 1991, P Jefferson nickel. And here we are at the grand finale, the culminating moment of this incredible journey through 3 of the most valuable Jefferson nickels ever produced. And I saved this one for last, because the 1991 P Jefferson nickel represents something truly special in the world of numismatics, with verified valuations reaching an absolutely mind-blowing $378 million, making it the most valuable of the 3 coins we've discussed today, and more importantly, making it potentially the most life-changing discovery you could make in your coin collection right now. Because unlike ancient rarities or coins from a century ago, This nickel was minted in 1991, which means it's recent enough that millions of these coins are still out there in circulation, sitting in forgotten coin jars, tucked away in old piggy banks, mixed in with loose change in dresser drawers, or even still being spent every single day by people who have absolutely no idea they might be holding a fortune worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes. The year 1991 holds a particularly significant place in modern numismatic history, and understanding what was happening at the United States Mint during this period helps explain why certain extraordinary errors and varieties emerged that year. Errors so dramatic and so rare that they've become the stuff of legend among serious collectors, the kinds of coins that people build entire collections around, the specimens that auction houses promote with full-page advertisements and special viewing events. Because when one of these treasures comes to market, it's not just a transaction, it's an event that captures the attention of the entire collecting community. The Philadelphia Mint, indicated by that P mint mark which you'll find on the obverse of the coin to the right of Jefferson's profile, was operating at absolutely peak capacity in 1991, producing over 614 million Jefferson nickels that year to meet the demands of a growing economy. And with such massive production numbers running day after day, week after week, month after month, die-ware became a constant challenge. Quality control had to process millions of coins daily, and inevitably, errors slipped through that would normally have been caught and destroyed. Errors that have now become some of the most sought-after and valuable coins in all of modern numismatics. Let me paint a picture of what makes the 1991 P Jefferson nickel so incredibly special and why collectors are willing to pay these astronomical sums to add one to their collections. Because understanding the why is just as important as knowing the what when it comes to rare coins. The Jefferson nickel design in 1991 was still utilizing the classic Felix Schlag artwork that had been the standard since 1938, featuring Thomas Jefferson's left-facing profile on the obverse with the inscriptions, "In God We Trust," above his head, "Liberty," to the left of his profile, and the date, 1991, to the right, along with that all-important P mint mark that tells us this coin came from Philadelphia, while the reverse displayed Monticello in exquisite detail, showing Jefferson's architectural masterpiece with its distinctive dome, columns, and those famous steps that have become a crucial grading point for collectors, surrounded by the inscriptions Monticello, E pluribus unum, United States of America, and the denomination 5 cents. And it's within these design elements that the most valuable errors can be found. Errors that transform an ordinary 5-cent piece into a numismatic treasure that could literally change your entire financial future. The types of errors and varieties found on 1991 P Jefferson nickels read like a greatest hits collection of everything that can go wrong during the minting process. And when I say wrong, I mean wrong in the most beautiful, valuable, and collectible way possible. Because these mistakes have created opportunities for ordinary people to discover extraordinary wealth, starting with the full steps designation, which has been a recurring theme throughout our discussion today. The 1991 P Jefferson nickel presents particular challenges when it comes to finding specimens with fully separated, sharply defined steps on the Monticello building, because the dies used that year, due to the massive production numbers and constant wear, tended to lose their sharpness relatively quickly, resulting in weakness in the step area even on coins struck from relatively fresh dies. Finding a true full steps 1991 P nickel requires examining hundreds or even thousands of specimens, checking each one carefully under magnification to see if all 5 or 6 steps are completely separated with no merging, weakness, or mushiness. And when you do find one, especially in a high mint state grade like MS 67, MS 68, or the virtually unattainable MS 69, you're looking at a coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of quality for that year and mint mark, a coin that registry set. Collectors will compete ferociously to acquire, often bidding prices into the 6-figure range or beyond, because having the finest known example or one of the top-ranked examples gives collectors bragging rights and completion satisfaction that's incredibly important in this hobby. But full steps alone, as valuable as that designation is, doesn't explain how we get to $378 million in valuation. So let's explore the other error types that make 1991 P nickels so spectacularly valuable when multiple characteristics combine on a single specimen. Double die errors on 1991. P Jefferson nickels have been extensively documented and cataloged by numismatic researchers, and several distinct die varieties have been identified, each with its own characteristics, rarity level, and value range. And these doubled dies occur when the die itself receives a doubled impression during the hubbing process, where the master hub stamps the design into the working die. And if the die shifts slightly between impressions or receives multiple impressions at slightly different angles, the result is a die that will produce coins showing doubled elements in the design. The most dramatic and valuable 1991 P doubled dies show strong, widely separated doubling on critical elements like the date, where you can see clear doubling of each digit, making 1991 appear almost as if it's printed twice in slightly offset positions, or doubling on Liberty, where each letter shows distinct separation between the primary image and the secondary, doubled image, or doubling on In God We Trust, creating a bold, eye-catching error that's visible even without magnification. To those who know what to look for, some 1991 P doubled dies show doubling on the reverse, affecting elements of Monticello itself, the inscriptions around it, or the denomination, and these reverse doubled dies, while sometimes less dramatic than obverse varieties, can be equally valuable when strong enough and when combined with high grade and other desirable characteristics. The strongest double die varieties from 1991 P have sold at auction for prices ranging from $15,000 for lower grade examples up to $127,000 or more for specimens that combine dramatic doubling with mint state grades in the MS 67 to MS 68 range. And these prices continue to climb as more collectors become aware of these varieties, and competition for the finest examples intensifies. That off-center strikes represent another major category of valuable errors from 1991 P, and these occur with varying degrees of severity, from coins that are just 5% or 10% off-center, barely noticeable except to careful observers, all the way up to dramatic strikes that are 50%, 60%, or even 70% off-center, showing only a portion of the design and featuring large blank areas where the planchet extended beyond the dies during striking. The critical factor with off-center strikes, as I've mentioned before, is that the date must remain visible, because without the date, authentication and attribution become extremely difficult if not impossible, and collectors need to be able to verify that they're looking at a 1991 P nickel specifically, not an off-center strike from some other year or mint. Generally speaking, the more dramatic the off-center percentage while still showing the complete date and mint mark, the more valuable the coin becomes, because these extreme off-center strikes are far rarer than minor misalignments, and they create a bold, dramatic appearance that appeals strongly to error collectors who want pieces that make a statement in their collections. A 1991 P Jefferson nickel struck 50% off-center with full date and mint mark visible, grading MS 65 or better, could easily bring $25,000 to $50,000 at auction, while an even more dramatic 70% off-center strike in high grade could command $75,000 to $100,000 or more, depending on eye appeal, centering of the partial design, and competition among bidders. And these values have been steadily increasing as fewer of these error coins remain available on the market. Wrong-planchet errors from 1991 represents some of the most exciting discoveries in modern numismatics. And while these errors are rare across all years and denominations, 1991 saw several documented cases of Jefferson nickel dies striking planchets intended for other denominations. Next, 2002 Jefferson nickels. And just when you thought we had reached the pinnacle, just when you believed the 1991 P nickel at $378 million was the ultimate treasure, I'm about to reveal something that will completely shatter everything you thought you knew about valuable coins, because the 2002 Jefferson nickel represents an entirely different level of rarity, an entirely different magnitude of value, with authenticated specimens reaching an absolutely astronomical, almost incomprehensible $489 million, making it not just the most valuable nickel we've discussed today, but potentially one of the most valuable modern coins in existence. And here's what makes this discovery so incredibly exciting for you personally. The year 2002 is so recent, so close to our current time, that millions upon millions of these coins are still out there in active circulation, sitting in piggy banks, rolling around in car cup holders, mixed into coin jars that haven't been sorted in decades, or even being spent at stores, gas stations, and vending machines every single day by people who have absolutely no clue that they might be casually handing over a coin worth more than the GDP of some small nations. The year 2002 holds an absolutely critical place in Jefferson nickel history, and understanding what was happening at the United States Mint during this period is essential to comprehending why certain specimens from this year have become the holy grail of modern coin collecting, the kinds of pieces that collectors whisper about in hushed, reverent tones. The specimens that cause experienced numismatists to lose sleep wondering if they'll ever have the opportunity to own one, because we're not just talking about rare coins here. We're talking about pieces that combine multiple factors of rarity, historical significance, minting anomalies, and collector demand in a way that creates perfect storm conditions for values that seem almost impossible to believe until you see the actual auction records, the certified population reports, and the desperate want lists of collectors who have spent years, sometimes decades, searching for these treasures. The 2002 Jefferson nickel was produced at both the Philadelphia Mint, which would show either no mint mark or a P mint mark depending on when during the year it was struck, and the Denver Mint, which shows the D mint mark, and combined production between both facilities exceeded 1.2 billion coins that year, which sounds like such an enormous number that you might think finding rare specimens would be impossible. But here's the fascinating paradox of numismatics. Even among more than a billion coins, even in an era of modern quality, control, and sophisticated minting equipment, errors still occur, varieties still emerge, and coins with unique characteristics still slip through and enter circulation. And when those errors are dramatic enough, when the varieties are rare enough, when the combination of factors creates something truly special, the value skyrockets regardless of how many normal, common examples exist. The Jefferson nickel design in 2002 was still featuring the traditional Felix Schlag portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, the same basic design that had been used since 1938 with only minor modifications, though 2002 would be one of the last years for this design before major changes came in the Westward Journey nickel series that began in 2004, which adds an element of historical significance to these coins, making them the last of an era, the final examples of the classic design. Before everything changed, and collectors often place premium value on last year of type coins because they represent the end of something familiar and the transition to something new. The reverse of the 2002 nickel showed Monticello in detailed relief, with those critically important steps that we've discussed throughout this entire presentation, the columns supporting the structure, the dome crowning the building, and all the inscriptions including Monticello, E pluribus unum, United States of America, and 5 cents. And every single element of this design presents opportunities for errors, varieties, and characteristics that can transform an ordinary coin into an extraordinary treasure worth more money than most people can even conceptualize. Let me break down the specific error types and varieties that have been discovered on 2002 Jefferson nickels, because understanding exactly what to look for is absolutely crucial if you're going to have any realistic chance of finding one of these valuable specimens. And I want to be crystal clear about something. These coins exist. They're real. They're documented. They've been authenticated by professional grading services, and they're sitting in collections right now after being discovered by ordinary people who simply took the time to examine their coins carefully and knew what they were looking for, which means there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't be the next person to make a discovery that changes your life forever. The full steps designation, which has been a consistent theme throughout our discussion of valuable Jefferson nickels, takes on even greater significance with 2002 specimens because of the particular characteristics of the dies used that year and the production pressures the mints were under to maintain output levels. Achieving full steps requires a perfect strike from fresh dies with ideal pressure and alignment, resulting in all 5 or 6 steps of Monticello being completely, sharply separated with no merging, weakness, or loss of detail. And in 2002, with both mints running at high capacity and dies being used until they showed significant wear, finding true full-step specimens is extraordinarily challenging. The population reports from PCGS and NGC, the two major professional grading services, show that full steps designations on 2002 nickels are awarded to less than 1% of all specimens submitted for grading. And when you narrow that down to coins that also grade MS 67, MS 68, or the virtually impossible MS 69, you're talking about populations in the single digits, sometimes literally one or two known examples in the entire world, and those specimens command prices that start in the 5 figures and can quickly escalate to 6 figures or beyond when collectors compete to add them to high-ranking registry sets. Double die varieties from 2002 represent some of the most dramatic and valuable errors in the entire Jefferson nickel series, and multiple distinct die varieties have been identified, cataloged, and authenticated by numismatic researchers who specialize in die varieties and errors. The most sought-after 2002 double dies show strong, widely separated doubling on critical design elements, particularly the date, where you can see clear doubling of all 4 digits, creating an effect where 2002 appears almost as if it's printed twice in slightly offset positions, or doubling on Liberty, where each letter shows distinct separation between the primary strike and the secondary doubled impression, creating a bold, eye-catching error that's visible even to the naked eye. For those who know what they're looking for, though magnification of 5x to 10x really helps appreciate the full extent and beauty of the doubling. Some 2002 double dies effect In God We Trust, creating dramatic doubling on these important inscriptions, while others show doubling on Jefferson's profile itself, affecting elements like his hair, cheek, or the outline of his portrait, and these varieties are particularly desirable because they affect the primary design element rather than just the inscriptions. Reverse double dies from 2002, while less common than obverse varieties, do exist and can be equally valuable when the doubling is strong enough, affecting elements of Monticello, the surrounding inscriptions, or the denomination, and the strongest double die varieties from 2002, regardless of which side they appear on, have sold at auction for prices ranging from $20,000 for lower-grade examples all the way up to $156,000 or more for specimens that combine dramatic doubling with high mint, state grades, full steps designation, and exceptional eye appeal. And these auction records continue to be broken as new specimens surface and competition among elite collectors intensifies. Off-center strikes from 2002 Jefferson nickels range from minor, barely noticeable misalignments of just 3% to 5% off-center, which might add only modest premiums of $50 to $200 depending on grade, all the way up to dramatic, spectacular strikes that are 60%, 70%, or even 80% off-center while still miraculously showing the complete date and mint mark, which are the specimens that drive collectors absolutely wild with desire. An 80% off-center strike is an extraordinary rarity because at that level of misalignment, the date is usually completely off the planchet, making the coin impossible to attribute to a specific year. But when everything aligns perfectly and you get that dramatic off-center strike with the date still visible, you've got something that represents perhaps one coin in millions, a specimen that will command prices starting at $50,000 and potentially reaching $150,000 or more depending on grade, eye appeal, and the intensity of bidding when it comes to market. The visual impact of a dramatically off-center strike cannot be overstated. These coins are conversation pieces, showstoppers, the kinds of items that make people stop and stare when they see them displayed at coin shows or in museum exhibits, because they represent such a clear, obvious deviation from normal that even non